Good afternoon, you wee bastards, and welcome back to another Westland video with Koala. So lads, the Battlefield Engineer event is over, thank God. April Fools is long gone, and as far as in-game events goes right now, there's only one on the table for the near future, which I'm not sure I'm allowed to talk about right now under NDA, so I won't say anything more on that. However, I likely won't be taking part in it anyway. Blah blah blah, not the point of this video. What this lack of stuff means though, is that update 1.89 is just around the corner. I'm expecting it to drop within the next 5 to 6 weeks. That would line up with the schedules of updates in the past around this time of year, which means dev blogs should start coming out any day now, hopefully by next week. Which means in essence that everything I say in this video is going to become useless within a fortnight, because today we're going over my top 10 most anticipated additions that I think are likely for patch 1.89. No, I do not know anything about what is coming this patch, nothing more than sneaking suspicion, but I have heard that apparently the F4 Phantom has been outright denied for 1.89, so we won't cover that in this video. I've also heard that apparently it's been confirmed, or at least partly confirmed or suggested by Gaijin, that it will come this year, so keep your fingers crossed for patch 1.91 or 1.93. I think it's quite fair to assume that it's not far away, but don't take my word for it. Now, I've made this video more of a podcast style. There will be some images of vehicles that I suggest and other relevant footage, but mainly I just didn't know what sort of footage would be best to put in the background of this video, so I've left it pretty much blank. Feel free to tab out and go play War Thunder and just listen if you wish. So this is going to be a top 10 list of vehicles and gameplay changes that I think are likely and have a specific wish for personally. Keep in mind that I am biased, I like certain aspects of this game more than others, I play certain aspects of this game more than others, so obviously I'm gonna ask for British helicopters before Italian or Japanese helicopters, and if I don't say anything, for example, about World War II aircraft or tanks, just keep in mind that this is my list and doesn't reflect what the player base at large wants or necessarily should want. You might not want these particular additions as much as I do, you might wish for some others, that's perfectly fine, more power to you. With that out of the way, let's get started. Number 10. The Imperial Japanese Navy. So this is something that I think is just about a given for next patch, and it's something I am quite excited about, although not because I'll actually play it. Gaijin's been dropping hints about a Japanese naval tech tree for quite a while. They did say that it would come in the first half of this year, so it only makes sense for that to mean this patch, and forum moderators have also been talking up something that should please Japanese players. A lot of people think that this will mean helicopters. I don't necessarily care about Japanese helicopters personally, and I don't think they'll come this patch either, but I could be wrong, let's wait and see. The IJN, however, is something that does get me pumped. Easily tied for the biggest nation in World of Warships simply by virtue of having the most ships and having all different types of ships, as well as being one of the most major nations of the seas in the Second World War, I find it somewhat odd that the Imperial Japanese Navy isn't here already, and I'm wondering if that might be down to a lack of smaller boats for Gaijin to add. I personally don't know of any, that's just not my area. As far as the ships themselves go, I think the Minekaze class destroyer is quite likely, possibly the Kagero and Yugumo, both classes any World of Warships player will be well acquainted with, and perhaps the Kuma for a light cruiser, although Japan being the most major naval nation that isn't here already, may bring with it the introduction of some heavy cruisers, which would be number 9 on my list, but we'll throw it in here for now, because I don't necessarily think it's all that likely. Japan doesn't have a huge amount of light cruisers that I know of, and it would be a convenient time for Gaijin to pour a load of hype into naval forces, so I'm thinking that the Furutaka class with its 200mm guns may be our first taste of a heavy cruiser in game. The problem I see with this is that as of World of Warships, the Furutaka is the earliest heavy cruiser in game, sitting at tier 5, while the US doesn't see a heavy cruiser until the Pensacola class at tier 6, which is definitely superior, and other nations don't see them until even later, with the Germans getting the Admiral Hipper at tier 8, and the Russians and British not getting any at all, unless you count the Russian Moskva at tier 10, which as far as I'm aware is a semi-fictional ship that never existed in the form we see it in that game. The Furutaka could bridge the gap between light and heavy cruisers, and as it theoretically would be the biggest, baddest and best ship in the game if it were introduced as the only heavy cruiser as of the patch, it would incentivize players to grind the Japanese Navy, which is a tactic Gaijin often likes to do with new nations or tech trees. Fun to think about, perhaps not all that likely, but either way, the main reason I'm excited for the Imperial Japanese Navy is just for more attention to be given to naval forces. The game mode does suffer from a lack of players, which means long match queues, low viewership here on YouTube, and some balancing or gameplay issues that Gaijin can't really justify spending the time, money and effort to fix. Hopefully the introduction of the Imperial Japanese Navy will help fix that and potentially bring with it some very interesting additions. Number 9. The T-90A. The second main battle tank seen in 2017's April Fool's event alongside the Leopard 2A5, this is the tank that, in my opinion, should have come at the same time as the 2A5, considering that the 2A5 is absolutely raffle stomping the game right now, and hence has had to receive a massive bat to the face in the form of an exorbitant repair cost. I think it's around 26,000 Silver Lions. That wouldn't have to be the case if you just introduced balanced vehicles, Gaijin. Let's fix it in a single patch, shall we? The T-90 Vladimir was the first tank produced by the Russian Federation after the fall of the Soviet Union, and essentially just builds on the T-72B, to the point where it is sometimes referred to as the T-72BM. Same armour, same type of heavy ERA, and the same auto-loading system. The most noticeable changes to us in Watano would be shell types, as well as the potential of having the Stora active protection system modelled. The T-90A really only improves upon the base T-90 by replacing the cast steel turret with a welded one, and wouldn't really make any differences to us in game, so I feel like the T-90A is our best bet. Slower than the T-80U, but with better armour coverage, meaning much smaller weak spots, better ERA coverage, and a smaller and less vulnerable ammunition carousel, the T-90A would be a noticeable improvement, even if it were only given the same 3BM42 shells currently fired by the Russian top-tier tanks. With a more improved 3BM46 Svinich shell, however, this tank would really be a powerhouse, and honestly it would be the first time Russia has really had a powerhouse tank at top tier since patch 1.75. As their current tanks are all very easy to take out, even frontally, by virtue of their large frontal weak spots, low speed and manoeuvrability, and a 3-man crew, and very vulnerable autoloader. They do have heavy armour on the front, especially on the turret, and fantastic firepower, but that only gets you so far, and Russia has struggled since the addition of the Abrams back in 1.77, now being taken over by struggling against the Leopard 2A5. The Tunguska is literally currently a better bet for your first spawn than the T-80U is, and that's a bit ridiculous. Lads, this is the tank that I teased out in my April Fool's video, but I do honestly think it is likely to be coming this patch. The time frame and capability match up well. Gaijin could decide to go with the base T-90 Vladimir, or name it T-90S, as this is possibly the most well-known quote-unquote variant of the tank, the T-90S being the export designation for either the T-90 Vladimir or T-90A. It's not a different tank. Or they could even just add the T-72B instead, it would practically be the same, sans the Stora active protection system. But keep in mind that we have missed out on tanks in the past like the base T-72 Euro, the original T-64 with a 115mm gun, and the Leopard 2A1 and 2A4 with C-Tech armour, the M60A3, Challenger Mark I, STC, AMX 32, and various others. I wouldn't be surprised if Gaijin just went straight for the T-90A, for the hype factor if nothing else. Perhaps what they could do is call it the T-90S and it would come stock with the cast turret, the welded one, which may add some 30 to 50mm of armour, being an upgrade module. Either way, this is a tank I cannot wait to play. It should be noticeably more effective than Russia's current fare, and if its APS is modelled even to some degree, it should be very unique as well. Number 8. British Helicopters. So this is something that my excitement has gone down for quite a bit, since playing the Challenger 2 and practically wanting to kill myself. But a British helicopter tech tree would be very nice to see this patch. Lads, I did an entire video on British helicopters outlining a potential tech tree that would give Britain the same level of capability as other nations, the same number of helicopters, etc. I'll link that video below and on screen if you want to go check it out. I highly recommend you do. Britain has some very unique potential helicopters and they really do need the support, as their tanks at high tier, yeah, they pretty much suck. The reason this edition isn't higher on my list, however, is because helicopters just aren't that usable anymore since the addition of the Tunguska and radar tracking for top tier AA. They get spawn camped, they can't go anywhere near the battlefield, not that they really could already, because if enemy tanks don't shoot you down, then your own team probably will, especially if you have Spitfire on your team, you stray and can. If you've seen that British helicopter video, you'll know that I also talked about some higher BR helicopters like the Eurocopter Tiger for Germany and France, and the Apache. We'll get to them later. Number 7. SAMS. In stark contrast to what I just said about the Tunguska and Radar A, one thing I actually do have a vested interest in is more SAM-equipped AA vehicles. Other nations do need them. It's very unfair for Russia to be the only nation that has one so far, and I do know of several that would work. The German Gepard could actually mount 4 FIM-92 Stinger infrared missiles. These are basically budget AIM-9 Sidewinders with somewhat similar capability to the AIM-9Ls the Viper currently carries, but less range, slightly worse tracking, and they are much smaller missiles, so they may not be a one-shot kill. There are obviously American SAMS too. The Bradley-based M6 Linebacker also carries 4 Stingers in place of the standard TOW missile launcher, but as I said in the past, I am not very knowledgeable when it comes to SAMS. The US Army typically uses man-pads or shoulder-mounted SAMS, or obviously the US Air Force if they need anti-air power, along with missile launching platforms like the Patriot, which house massive missiles with ranges over 100 kilometers, and they won't be coming anytime soon. They certainly don't have anything comparable to the Gepard with Stingers or the Tunguska, with both high rate of fire cannons and short-range capability surface-to-air missiles. These vehicle types are going to be very difficult to balance, but as I said in my videos about Radar AA, I think fire and forget SAMs like the Stingers on the Gepard or Linebacker would be balanced with the Tunguska, because although they don't require manual tracking, they also cannot be fired at ground targets, take time to lock, have a lower G tolerance, and can be defeated by flares and other missile countermeasures. All in all, a series of additions that I believe would be balanced and necessary, and considering my relative lack of knowledge on this subject, there would be plenty of additions that I've never even heard of before, which is always exciting for me. Number 6. New maps. New maps in game are always interesting to see and explore, and typically Gaijin is very good when it comes to the visuals, with maps like Alaska and American Desert looking pretty fantastic. I remember how impressed we all were by the visuals of Fulda back in 2017. The problem is that Gaijin's actual map design as far as gameplay functionality goes is honestly pretty poor, easily subpar to their main rivals World of Tanks and Armored Warfare. I for one would love to see some more variety in maps, with some true modern city maps with tall skyscrapers dwarfing those in Alaska, and bigger cities with highways, overpasses and underpasses, parks, and city outskirts where some longer range engagements could take place. Docks or naval bases, modern airports or large train stations would make for fantastic scenery and provide some good opportunities for balance, as well as allowing capture points to actually be something instead of just chalk circles on the ground. Large hills, forests, riverlands, or rural locations with small towns or villages and bitumen roads in between would also be great to see. Visual designers in Gaijin could go nuts, and us players would undoubtedly enjoy having some real interesting scenery. I know that's my favourite part of Alaska and American Desert, but gameplay has to be prioritised, and neither of those maps are actually any good for high-tier gameplay at all, as they're too small, too flat, too cramped. Bigger, more spacious cities, docks, airports with runways, hilly and forested areas, these would be good, and Gaijin shouldn't be afraid to size up these maps. Our late tier 6 to tier 7 tanks all travel around at 50 km per hour off-road and 70 km per hour on, so it's perfectly fine to make us drive for a little while to get to the enemy side of the map, if there is something to do or at least something to look at while we're driving there. These maps would increase the capability of helicopters, allowing them to come into the map a little rather than sitting many miles away, and longer range engagements would benefit top tier tanks, helping to bring armor meta back to the game at top tier, as you wouldn't be able to flank your enemy or aim at their frontal weak spots like breaches, mantlets, driver ports, or lower plates quite so easily. So long as the maps are balanced, semi-realistic, at least to the point where they look like real-world locations and have realistic terrain, and provide some diverse opportunities for gameplay, then I would appreciate them. The possibilities for new maps are endless, from the city of Grozny, which was assaulted by T-80s in the First Chechen War, to forest locations in Germany or desert towns in the Middle East. Big maps are something I know may not be a popular wish, but I can promise you lads that if Gaijin does develop them in the way that I hope they do, then they would be a hell of a lot of fun, and vastly improve the gameplay at top tier, along with my number 5 suggestion. Number 5. Thermal Optics. So this is something that may end up being a little unpopular, but I would really love to see Gaijin try it, and that is realistic thermal optics for top tier tanks. Now, the main issue with adding strictly realistic optics is that they wouldn't be balanced. The Russian tanks, for example, which have to sit at long ranges in order to make their armor viable, wouldn't be able to be effective at these ranges because their inferior optics compared to contemporary tanks wouldn't allow it. However, if Gaijin were to implement some level of thermal vision to all tanks of a certain tier or battle rating across the board, regardless of nation or time frame, for example, everything 9.0 and above, or everything tier 6 and 7, etc., I'm sure Gaijin could balance it better than me. Balance wouldn't be so much of an issue. Give them all the exact same optics. That's what we have in game currently anyway. Target detection by use of thermal optics and IFF tags specifically is a huge part of modern tank warfare, and as of yet, it's completely missing from War Thunder. Being able to detect targets through smoke or tree covering due to their thermal signature may sound like it just renders soft cover redundant, and it kind of does, but so long as it's implemented in a balanced way, it may offer up changes to gameplay that end up being very good, rewarding players who adapt to the new mechanics. Hull down defensive gameplay all of a sudden becomes much more viable because you'll be able to see anybody who is able to shoot at you and angle your armor towards them, as well as not spending ages looking for a target to shoot at, and at the same time a secluded flanking route will actually be extremely powerful, with you being able to guarantee remaining undetected until you expose yourself to fire. Hence, not only do main battle tanks become more effective, but IFVs do as well, as they'll be more difficult to detect and be able to flank around and engage exposed targets safely. This kind of goes hand in hand with my last suggestion for new maps. As an example, I will try to insert some footage of a Leopard 2 firing from behind cover if I can find it. You'll be able to see the type of realistic terrain I'm talking about. In our current maps, thermal optics may not be quite such a good thing, as it'll just turn realistic mode into arcade mode. In fact, the big separator between RB and AB at top tier, where all tanks are blisteringly quick anyway, is that in RB you have to do all your spotting yourself, while in AB, if you're close enough, you get markers telling you where the enemy tanks are. Technically speaking, this would be less realistic. Funny how that works out. Another reason Gaijin's been against thermal optics is because apparently it would be too taxing on lower end machines, preventing some people from playing. I don't see why. Personally, I think it could be optimized to be not too significant a hamper on performance, but keep in mind this is not my area at all. But if it is too much of a difference in performance, then I don't really have a fix for that either. Perhaps everyone who has a shitty PC will just be at a disadvantage if they're playing top tier. I don't know, I don't have a fix. Whatever your own thoughts on the addition of thermal optics is, this is, as I've said, my personal wish list, and I would very much like to see it attempted. Number 4. Tier 7 Helicopters. Now, this is another segment for which I'm going to refer you back to my video on British helicopters, as I discussed in far more detail the helicopters that could be added and how they could be tiered up against each other, but basically what I'm talking about is the AH-64 Apache and the AH-64D Apache Longbow, the German and French Eurocopter Tiger, and the Russian Mi-28 and Ka-50 Black Shark. The Apache could also be given to Japan, who use it bought from America, and Britain as well, who manufactured their own version of the Apache Longbow under license, using unique engines and weapon systems not seen on American Apaches. For more detail on these weapon systems, head over to check out the British helicopter video and skip to the Apache section, where I began talking about helicopters that could sit at battle ratings like 10.3 or 10.7. Of course, there are also helicopters that could be added in lower in the battle ratings. Different types of helicopters, such as naval-based helicopters, anti-submarine helicopters, but my main wish would be for an Apache, a Tiger, and a Ka-50 or 52. These more advanced weapon systems would be fun to use, although they would be near impossible for tanks on the battlefield to do anything about, but considering that the same is true about helicopters already, the only things that can combat them if being used correctly are, well, the Tunguska and fighter aircraft. I think it would create that rock paper scissors at top tier that Orange used to talk about, with tanks, CAS and SPAA at low tiers. Helicopters take out ground vehicles very easily, aircraft take out helicopters, and SPAA take out aircraft, while the tanks take out each other and the SPAA and focus on the game objectives. Of course, some spawn point rebalancing would need to come into effect, it already does to be honest, but that's something I leave up to Gaijin. Number 3. The M1A1 HA. Along with the T-90A coming to help Russia combat the currently overpowered Leopard 2A5, America should at the same time receive the depleted uranium armoured Abrams, the M1A1 HA, or Heavy Armour. This would effectively be an identical tank to the M1A1, but with a kinetic armour on the turret cheeks of 600mm, making them effectively impenetrable frontally, as well as having a little bit lower speed. DU doesn't really do anything to the chemical protection, in fact it actually lowers it by a tiny bit, and the protection of the hull and sides of the tank wouldn't change. The Abrams used to be the tank that had low penetration and firepower for the tier, along with not the best armour, but high mobility, high rate of fire, and most importantly very good survivability, being the most difficult tank to one-shot and most often requiring 2 if not 3 shots to kill. However, since the introduction of the 3BM42 Mango round for the T64B and T80B along with the T80U, and the DM33 shell coming to the Leopard 2A5 as well as the Type 90, the Abrams really don't have survivability on their side anymore. The M1A1 however shook things up by reversing that Abrams have low pen, actually having the highest penetrating kinetic shell in the game, the M829. For the M1A1HA to also have very effective armor protection, impenetrable at least on the turret, although realistically 3BM42 would pen it at point blank range, the tank would once again rival the best in the game, while currently the M1 and IPM1 are rendered practically obsolete, and while the M1A1 very well balances the T80U, actually beating it in my own personal opinion and experience, although I know some people will disagree, it does not compete with the Leopard 2A5. The M1A1 heavy armor variant would, and would also compete well against the T90A. Now, since the ballistics changes, certain shells in-game are very much inaccurate to their historical performance. DM23 for the Leopard 2A4 is probably the worst offender, as it was already missing penetration and actually got nerfed even further. IRL, the M829 shell was only meant to be a marginal improvement on DM23. For the base M829 shell to have more pen than even DM33 is an absolute joke, and I believe that if DM23 and DM33 were buffed back up to historical performance, then the M829A1 shell could come to both the M1A1 and M1A1HA. That gets rid of the HEDFS stock grind for the M1A1, by the way, guys. This shell has ever so slightly more penetration than DM33, hence the tanks retain the same relationship, because currently M829 has slightly more penetration than DM33 in game. 3BM42 would also be buffed up to historical values, meaning that it would be the only thing in-game capable of penning the HA's turret cheeks, which it could only do from inside, I think around 350 meters range. This, in my opinion, is perfect balance. Now, if you're thinking 4 Abrams variants, 5 including the XM1, is too many for Germany to combat, then I'll say that the C-Tech Leopard 2A4 could come in to slot in before the 2A5, filling the role of matching up against the M1A1 and T80U. I know many people have suggested that the HA model with DEW meshed armor could come as a modification for the M1A1, similarly to how Russian tanks get Contact 1 ERA as a mod, but I honestly think this would be a very bad implementation, as it would noticeably change up the performance of the vehicle rather than just giving it minor differences in protection like Contact 1 ERA does. Instead, I believe that the T64B should be renamed T64BV and get the ERA stock. I've said this so many times over the past few months. And the T80B, well, I spoke about this in a video several months ago, go check it out if you're confused. Number 2. More Tier 6 jet fighters. By far my most anticipated part of the game for future patches is the development of modern jets. Within the next 12 to 18 months I expect we'll see F-14 Tomcats, MiG-25 Foxbats, Harriers, Tornadoes, and other much more modern jets. And that very much excites me, because I love modern jet combat in video games, and would love to see it done in a slightly more realistic way than, say, Ace Combat or Project Wingman, but a slightly less daunting and confusing and stressful way than DCS, which, by the way, I've been getting into recently, and oh boy, is it a learning curve if you want to be any good. I have no idea what I'm doing half the time. Modern jets in War Thunder very much excites me, and this upcoming patch, I'm expecting that we'll get a few. Now, I said that I've heard the F4 Phantom was officially denied, but I don't think that the MiG-21, at least in its early form, the MiG-21 F-13, is off the table as well. This aircraft would be slower than its latter counterpart, the MiG-21 BIS, which would match the F-40 Phantom, and in this early form, the F-13 would be a good match for perhaps the F-104C Starfighter, Bark Lightning, and the Mitsubishi T2. Other options include the SEPECAT Jaguar, a slightly more ground attack focused multi-role or strike fighter which could come to Germany, Britain and France, which the T2 was developed to be identical to, so obviously it would be balanced, along with the F5E Tiger II, F8 Crusader, F7 Cutlass, one of my favourite jet fighters, the Su-7, Su-17 and perhaps even the Su-9. I think the French Mirage is a little bit too much for us right now. These are all primarily fighter/interceptor aircraft, and all of them would work in game right now without power creeping us too much. Actually, they'd all practically match the speed of the T2 and balance it out quite well, while some do have more advanced ordnance options that could be held off and given to them in later patches. There are of course other tier 6 jets that we could get, like the Supermarine Swift F2, Hunter F6 and Sea Vixen for Britain, a Russian MiG-19S, an F-86H or F-86K for America, German G91s, etc. But my main focus is going to be whatever is top of the board. Number 1. The A-10. The Thunderbolt, the Warthog, the ultimate machine. This is another addition that I teased in my April Fool's video, and yet I don't think it's actually that far off the cards for this update. The A-10 is perhaps the most famous jet attacker the world has ever seen, and has one of the longest service records as well. With its powerful GAU-8 Avenger 30mm rotary cannon and hardpoints that make an A1 Sky Raider shy away from a fight, along with very respectable performance for such a loaded jet, the Warthog would be the most powerful ground strike aircraft we've ever seen in War Thunder. Now, I'm not saying that America needs it in-game, I'm just saying that I want it, and I do very much want it. With the option for starting with the A-10A without some of the most advanced weapon systems carried by this thing in active service today, and the later A-10C to come to us in future patches, I think the A-10 could be added into the game at tier 6 right now without being too overpowered. Now, I did decide to call this section the A-10, but what I want to see is a whole bunch of jet attackers, including the Su-25 Drac as well, and any other attackers that would come to balance out the bird, like the Italian A-11 Ghibli or German Donya Alpha Jet. Not just the A-10, but there's also the potential of the A-4 Skyhawk and A-6 Intruder as well, and the Crusader-based A-7 Corsair II, another of my all-time favourite aircraft. Close air support is my absolute favourite part of this game. I love swooping in, making passes, loitering over the battlefield, getting into dogfights, and at top tier that's kind of gone right now, with SPAA being so horrendously powerful, rendering anything sub tier 6 practically useless, and even tier 6s can't really risk dogfighting most of the time. With aircraft like the A-10, Su-25, as well as fighters like the SEPECAT Jaguar I mentioned earlier, this might start to see a resurgence. Fighters will be battling outside of the range of AA vehicles. Now, without going into detail about the weapon systems carried by these tier 6 ground strikers, that's a whole video by itself and this one's already kind of long, but we're talking about radar homing missiles, meaning that SPAG's functionality of being able to turn off and lower their radar dishes would actually serve a purpose, as well as laser guided bombs and missiles, air-to-air self-defense weapons, alongside dumb bombs and rockets as well. These aircraft were never capable of out-dogfighting the fighter jets of their time, and since those fighter jets were also often capable of loading some serious payload, aircraft like the A-6 Intruder or Su-25T Frogfoot had to be loaded to the teeth if they wanted to keep their jobs, and boy do they deliver the pain. Start your argument about balance and how aircraft ruin tank battles in the comments if you wish, but you will never convince me that close air support isn't the sickest part of this game. I can't wait to see it extended into tier 6 attack aircraft, and you can bet the A-10 Thunderbolt is going to be top of that list. Well lads, that is going to do us for this video. I hope you have enjoyed, and that if you did, you leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell, join the 360 squad. Of course, this is not everything that I want to come to War Thunder, or think should come this update. If I was doing a top 15 or 20, I'd include stuff like graphics improvements, UI improvements, World War II era vehicles like Japanese heavy tanks or the Italian P-43, Leopard 1 prototypes, the SP-1C, Panzer II Lukes, no wait, fuck that thing. I could talk forever about battle rating rebalancing, but that generally doesn't come with big updates, rather in between them, once Gaijin knows where things should move or what should happen. I'd talk about reworks to RRB or battleships, Japanese and Italian helicopters, Italian and French naval forces, submarines, naval helicopters, but these are things I don't really see coming this patch. I'd mention the M1128 Striker MGS, the UH-60 Blackhawk, the M3A3 variant of the Bradley. Yes, I might happen to be just a bit of a freebie. But this has been my list of the top 10 things that I personally am most excited for, that I think may or should come to War Thunder in the very next patch. Once again, if your wishlist looks different to mine, more power to you, and please leave your top 10 lists in the comments. I'd love to know what you are most excited for that might come this patch. Not him, not her over there, but you. Please leave your thoughts on all the things I've said in this video. Come follow me on Twitch, Twitter, Discord, and check out Patreon if you wish to support the channel further and gain access to some special rewards. Always remember, lads, keep your bagpipes to hand, keep your kilt firmly on, and I shall see you in the next video. I say a wee thank you to these lads for supporting me on Patreon. The Bretlander, Seagull Nuts, DA261, Gisli Garashin, and Dark Recon. You lads are bra. If you wish to join them, come check out the link in the description below.